wear your beliefs on your sleeve, and you have to like disagree with everybody who doesn't have the same opinion, and it's toxic. We've lost that ability to be civil, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I think partly is also due to the polarized nature in a lot of countries. I mean, I always think of America as being the most polarized
Now
country
recording.
that I've ever come across. You're either on one ideological extreme or on the other ideological extreme, and there isn't really the center ground where people kind of go, okay, you've got a good point here, and you've got a good point here. Let's see how we can work together and be conciliatory and collaborative and collegiate. People are. Oh, what was there's another quote that I heard? Do you want to be happy or do you want to be right?
Uh,
And there's a lot of people who just want
well,
to be
that's
right.
it's like we were
yeah,
talking about on
yeah.
your show, Majid. You're expected in the current
That's where it came
climate.
from, Bill. I was listening to you guys.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, that's what
No,
I said to
that's
him whenever I got on was I listened to the part where you were talking about straddling that fence between, truckers and what you do here and like, and that distrust of I totally grew up with that, right? I mean that's where I come from and knew that it wasn't my take on things. But what I was telling Majid before you came was the idea that we used to be able to just be okay with someone not having the same opinion as us and not having it. And I think a lot of us still are. And Majid, what you just said, like the idea that I still believe, even though there was, Trump won the popular vote and all that, like I still think that there's a majority centrist, a political leaning for most people. Like I think there's good on both sides and bad on both sides. And the point is that most people do sort of funnel down that center aisle, but it's just the loud people, the crazies that have to like, you know,
I think it's
make the
also the
most
nature
noise.
I think it's also the nature of democracy that being nuanced and centrist doesn't generally get you votes. What gets you votes is the kind of ideological base, whatever that base might be. Um, I think a lot of that also depends on the type of democratic system you've got.
Mm.
For example, in this country, we have the first past the post system where, the the person who wins in a seat, even if he wins by one vote, he's the MP, he's a member of parliament for that seat. So you could have a situation like we had in our last election. And by the way, a I'm a Labour centre left type of guy, but even then, I do worry that there's a democratic deficit when a party like Labour can get 32 or 33% of the vote and yet have 300 something seats.
Mm.
Sorry, 400 something seats. In a parliament of 600, where a party gets 25% and ends up with 2 seats because that
Yeah,
vote
that
has
doesn't
been
seem right.
spread. But I mean, and that's the, I mean, the opposite of that system is the system that you have in, say, Israel, where you have pure proportional representation, where nobody votes for anybody specific. They just vote for a party, and then the seats are allocated on a
Mm.
percentage basis. Well, if you do that, it's a recipe for chaos, really, because I mean, setting aside issues of genocide and war for a second, a lot of Israeli politics has always been around coalitions and fragile coalitions where they can be brought down at a moment's notice when one party withdraws its 5 members, which might be
Mm.
enough, which would have then tip the ruling coalition under a majority. Then you have another election. I mean, I think they went through a period of between 21 and 23, or 20 and 23, maybe 3 years, where they had 4 separate general elections because
Yes, I remember that.
yeah. And so um I think
Well,
the best system is somewhere in between. I must say the German system, because obviously the Germans had their election a couple of weeks ago, and it did seem very complicated, their rules. But when you actually sat down and looked through them, you thought, actually, this seems to be a reasonable balance of getting the people who won in their constituencies, and at the same time trying to reflect a national vote spread as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's definitely something that requires effort.
I
And
think, I think if you look at the Electoral College, I mean, even though it's been, I think most people would say that it's been problematic at best. The purpose of it, the point of it makes sense where you're trying to give equal representation for smaller minorities. You know what I mean? Like where, because you can have such an easy majority of, let's say, the east or the coastal states where the heavy population centers are, and then you have the center of the country where there's many fewer people, and well, why shouldn't they have at least more of a vote because they can be so easily drowned out? So I mean, I think if you kind of think about like what the point of it was, it sounds good, but in practice, it's been just one of those things where you have a popular vote that doesn't really matter because you have this electoral college vote that is, unfortunately, because some states have so many votes, it can be easily swayed by, one or two key states. And I don't know. I feel like every election is so close. I mean, I'm trying to think back to any election in my lifetime that was less than, 10% maybe. You know what I mean? Like in one direction or another. Like it's always so like razor fine down that line. So
yeah, and so
that's why.
and this is my point about why I think America is very polarized. I think, and that's a problem for people outside of America, because it's kind of like, which constituency do we talk to? Who is it? You know,
Like there
and
should
I
be two
felt,
different. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, um,
yeah. And listen, as as someone living here, I can tell you that that's exactly how a lot of us feel. The things that we see happening and the way that it can be changed. I would like to think that what we're seeing is that it can change in either direction. Unfortunately, maybe a little too fast or faster than the separation of powers would allow for. Like I think ideally it should be a little slower than what's we've seen happen in such a short amount of time. But the idea is that if you have sentiment, you have the people on your side, then you can make changes. And I don't know.
yeah. Anyway, I
It's
suppose we better get
it's
this.
hard.
I suppose we better get
Yeah,
this podcast
get it out of the
started.
This
way.
concludes nerd politics.
Well, we get it out of the way.
Yeah,
That's the
get it
point.
out of our system.
Catharsis, right? Just get it out.
It's a lot what's going on right now. And gosh, where do we even start with it? Where does it end?
Actually, I think what's on my mind is, Bill, how does your hair grow so fast?
Mine?
Didn't you just get it cut like super short like 2 weeks
It
ago?
probably feels that. No, I didn't get one 2 weeks ago. It's been almost a month now.
Okay.
'Cause we
Still,
don't-
I swear last time I saw you it was like like shorter than.
Were you on the last
Anyway.
OTC, Eric? I'm trying to remember.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think I was. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was.
I just
all
listened
four
to
of us. Yeah.
Yeah, I just listened to it and I was on it, so it wasn't me.
My boy and I both need a haircut, but I don't know if I'm going to get time today or not.
Yeah.
I'm just podcasting left and right today.
Yep. It's
Yeah.
a podcast day. Anyway,
I
so
can't
should we
tell
get
you-
started before
How weird it was to be
Being
on
interviewed.
a show that I don't have to edit. That was fantastic.
You know what? You might find yourself doing a bit of editing.
I was just gonna say, you be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, gosh, I should have just kept my mouth shut.
Yeah. When I kind of go, Bill, why isn't this doing it? I'm trying
Yeah.
this. Why isn't this working? What's going on? Mom.
Actually, what's going to happen eventually is Bill's going to have a turnkey system that he can just sell to other people. And be
I
like,
could make a
"Here's
macro or something for
the
Audacity.
William Hauser School of Podcasting."
God, I wish I was that good at it. But, and we are our own worst critics when we come to it. And sometimes I'll listen to a show and I use the exact same method that I've used for 5 other shows, and it just sounds like crap to me. And I'm like, okay, is this my critical brain looking at this, or is this my emotional brain looking at it? because I'll go back a day later and it sounds completely fine to me. So
It's hard to be so close to it and to also be so close to it in the moment. I agree with you. If you just take a day or two and then come back
yeah,
to it. Not only that, excuse me. I mean, if you have an immediate thought like, "Oh, I have to go back and fix that one thing," if you're not taking notes of it, maybe that's something. But like when I was doing more podcast editing, I definitely had that like just a little bit of distance helped because it wasn't so fresh in my mind and I could make a better objective decision about what to keep and what not to. But I tend to be more heavy handed when it comes to editing, though. Like I see editing as a way to sort of craft a more concise, not message so much as just discussion, take out a lot of the
cut the fat off.
onerous. Yeah. So.
All right, I'm gonna do a 3, 2, 1, then 20 seconds. All right, 3, 2, 1, record. All right, episode 47. Seems like it ought to be higher than that. I don't know, or lower. I can't decide.
What's that?
The episode number, because
Oh.
we've been at this a couple years now,
Yeah.
at least a year.
It's deceptive when you see something like 100 episodes. It's like, oh, is that a lot? I'm not sure. And it is a lot. 100 is a lot.
Yeah.
And so, when you're getting anywhere near that, I know we're
So-
not there yet, but
456 episodes when you're only putting them out every 2 weeks.
yeah.
That is amazing.
And
All right.
problematic.
Big time, because shows fall into a rut and it's difficult to know how to pull out. Well, we three know how to pull out of it, but
Yeah.
that's a conversation
Yeah.
for another day. Linux OTC. Welcome to episode 47. I'm Bill.
I'm Eric.
And I'm the other guy.
Oh,
That's
no, you're not.
Leo. No, I'm
Don't
not
do
Leo. I'm
it.
Majid.
The other guy. Yeah, the other guy's not here. Couldn't be with us. Life happens. God knows it happens to me.
It
But
does.
there you
Yeah.
go.
And he's always sorely missed.
He is.
Always sorely missed. Always.
He's
Leo's one of those people I enjoy speaking to, and I rarely get enough time to do so. And so this show's like my way to do that. So when he's not
this
here,
is your Leo time.
it's a bummer. It is.
Yeah. Like hammer time. It's Leo time.
I was really, when I started this show, I was really honored that he agreed to be on the show, because in my mind, because my experience listening to him was on his other show, Linux User Space, and he was one of the co-hosts on Mintcast, and it, to me, and these are the celebrities of my life, the people that did the Linux podcast, because I've always been far more interested in stuff like that than what normal
it's
people.
amazing, isn't it? I mean, I remember I was thinking about this, that I first started listening to Mintcast probably 2012.
Oh,
In the Scott and Rob days, and I was there when Linux Luddites first came onto the scene,
Yeah.
and Joe Ressington was on, and all that sort of stuff. And I remember, especially in the first couple of episodes of Mintcast, I mean, and even now, sometimes to an extent, it does feel weird to be a part of something that I used to consume as content, in the past, which is, I think, I still remember that time when I came on Roundtable for the first time, and I felt a bit starstruck. Do you know what I mean?
oh yeah, I know exactly
Because-
what you mean, and I
Because I know that Roundtable is there every week, and I know there's all sorts of other ways of interacting with the hosts and stuff like that. But I mean, it was still different to actually just being on there and talking to people whose voices you have been hearing for a while. Do you know what I mean? If you start thinking about how long you've been listening to specific podcasts and stuff like that, so There's a movie podcast which I listen to, Kermode and Mayo. They used to be on BBC Radio 5, and then now they've got their own podcast on Spotify and stuff. And it's over 20 years. In fact, it's probably 25 years I've been listening to that podcast. And
Wow.
you think because it always used, because it used, well, I mean, first it was a radio show, and it would always be on Friday afternoon movies, and it would be around the time when I'd be driving home from work, or even university. Actually, my final year of university, I remember. And so I always used to hear it then, and then it became a habit of listening to, and then it became a podcast, and yeah, I mean, well, sometimes but then, even when you think about something like YouTube, for example, I mean, YouTube has been around for hitting 20 years now. It's 2006, if I remember, when Google took it over.
Mm-hmm.
It is quite regular. You will quite regularly see videos, posted 18 years ago, 19 years ago, especially when I'm like looking at old songs or something. I'm looking for that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'll put it up, and it'll be like, this video was posted on Vivo on YouTube in 2007. And you're like going, whoa, okay.
I think
That's
about
Used to
those.
be a 10-minute time limit back then, if you remember.
Yeah, it
You know?
it wasn't just time; it was the file size and all that stuff too. There was
Yeah.
all kinds of limitations, and I think about those shows that have been around a long time, and I think about the people that have been on those shows the whole time, because I remember, I just wonder how the experience has changed for them, because I remember the first time I was on Mintcast. It exhausted me because as you said, Majid, I was so starstruck, and so kind of, I was struck with imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
and like, who am I to talk about this stuff? What? You're a truck driver.
Yeah.
What the hell do you know about computers and Linux and open source? And you need to start acting your age. Who do you think you are? And all that's going through my mind. And it was to such a degree that I had to take like that Monday off of work, because that really exhausted
Wow.
me. I mean, that's a 3-hour show, kids. And
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah,
an
it is.
it's
It
an
is.
exhausting show, and it's not just a 3-hour show. It's also writing the show notes.
oh,
At
it's
least takes
labor
me.
intensive. Yeah.
It takes me. I mean, so I wasn't on last week because I had tried fasting, and that hadn't ended well at all. And I had to give up halfway through before I keeled over. And then the thought then of, I still need to write my show notes. It's going to take me about an hour, and then it's going to be 3 hours, and I'm just feeling vaguely normal again now, and I was just, and as much as I love the program, yeah, it is intensive. You
Yeah.
do have to take time out to do it, and at least, I mean, in one sense, you guys, because for you guys it's the afternoon, you've still got the the evening to do whatever family work stuff that it is that you need to do. For me, I basically lose most of that day. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm either doing the show notes, getting ready, and then start. By the time we finish, it's like, man, I just need to go to bed now because I've got work the next morning. I'm supposed to be
What time is it for you? If we finish at like 5 or 6, what time is it?
11.
Yeah,
Yeah.
see, that's a lot to ask of somebody. And when we had, oh gosh, the guy in India, Nishant, it was like 3 a.m. or something like that when he would get off sometimes. So
It'd be probably 3 or 4 easily, 3 or 4 in the morning.
And I mean, we want so bad to have a worldwide diverse sort of crew on the show, on all of the shows actually, and it's hard. It's a lot to ask for in terms of the labor intensiveness of it all with the notes, and then showing up and staying put behind that camera for 3 hours, and every time we think it ain't going to be 3 hours. Let one of us say,
every time we think it's going to be, this is going to be a quick
this
show.
will be a short one. You just want to take a ball bat to whoever said that.
It's normally you, actually, Bill.
Is it always me?
Yeah,
everybody else learned their lesson.
Yeah. So, I mean, I enjoy it. I think there's a privilege that people actually want to listen to a random doctor in central England talking about Linux when he really is a real noob, as the whole web hosting thing last time showed. I didn't know my ass from my elbow on
But
that. I still don't know my ass
there's
from my elbow.
value in that. There's a level of curiosity and excitement that comes from somebody that doesn't necessarily know exactly what they're talking about because they do it for a living. You're the one that is excited about learning this new thing, or
Yeah.
you don't always.
Well, I mean,
not
even doing the whole OBS stuff earlier,
Yeah.
and being able to plumb that in, I thought, oh, that's pretty cool, because
Yeah.
I haven't, as I said, the way that I mean, this is going to sound so bad. When I first started the Atypical Anesthetist podcast, the first couple of episodes, I remember I would do a Skype call and I'd have my phone recording through from the speaker.
Oh my.
That would be my audio, because I just literally didn't know how to do it.
Should have just went down to the thrift shop and got you a tape recorder and.
Yeah, I might as well have. Do you know what I mean? It is the 21st century equivalent of that. Do you know what I mean? I mean, and I think the way that technology has gone, and the fact that you can do stuff like that and it will still sound passable. Yeah, it's not going to be great audio. It's not going to be the greatest mix and whatever, but it's doable. It's manageable. There was another guy that wanted me on his podcast, and he's in Botswana, in southern Africa. I don't want to say South Africa because it's a different country, but Southern Africa. And I was like, how are we going to do it? And he goes, oh, we just do a Zoom call and I'll strip the audio from it. And I was kind of like, oh, okay. Do you know what I mean? So, we have so many tools that can make the accessibility of being a podcaster or being a content creator. And I think that's a good thing. Oh, I mean, it's a democratization of technology and viewpoints and stuff like that. But then if you want to do it properly, you do realize that it is a bit more involved. And I think this is where a lot of companies make money. So one of the interesting things from our discussion last time about web hosting and things like that was the fact that I was speaking to my son. So my eldest son, he has a business on the side where he makes he does basically like logo printing onto in t-shirts and tops and things like that. So people say, can I have my name, or can I have this logo, or can I have a flag? Palestine flag sells quite well these days, on my t-shirt and this, that, and the other. And so I was asking him, so how are you doing it? I mean, obviously I know how he's buying and selling, but how are you kind of promoting yourself? Oh, through Instagram. Okay, fine. Yeah, and through my website. Ooh, you got a website? Yeah, through Shopify. Okay. Well, how does that work then? Oh, so Shopify sounds a lot like, I mean, not just from the way it sounds as the word, but I mean, the model sounds very much like Spotify in the sense of you're using all of their services and their way to host your stuff, and they do charge. Because I said to him, so how much is that costing? He said, well, the first month was free, but then after that it's £25 a month. £25 a month? So yes, I'm like, you do realize that if you were to do it yourself and have your own web host and all that, you're not going to be spending more than £5 quid a month. And he's like, really? Yeah. So I thought, that's the business model. That's a good way of
I was just gonna say,
making money.
He would be responsible for handling the transactions, the money, connecting that to his account. Now he's responsible for credit card numbers and things like that. Whereas if you use a service like Shopify, they absorb all that responsibility, So, I mean, there is value in having somebody.
Oh, no, there's
like
definitely value. There's definitely value.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think he realized that.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he realized that when it was like, oh, is it really that cheap? And I'm like, yeah, it is. If you were to do it yourself and this, and this. And so I think I said to him, you know what? Maybe listen to our last episode of OTC when we talk a bit about this kind of stuff. Maybe you get some ideas.
I'm glad you brought that up because I've thought about that since then. You were being given some advice about, just, write an HTML file and then this, that, and the other yourself. And I got to thinking, and that's fine. But with with WordPress, I can put things in the page that I would not know how to write out manually. Like for all of our shows, there is a search field where you just type in a topic that you remember us, you knew we talked about at some point, a topic, and then I've created a search tag that will take you directly to the episode that we talked about that subject on. You know, I don't know how to write that in HTML to put on a website. You know, it's just
No, and
something
there's
that
also there's a difference between the practical nature of wanting a website and the, technical aspect of understanding how every single thing works.
Yeah.
Like, I drive a car. That doesn't mean I want to know every single thing about how an internal combustion engine works, or
Oh yeah,
how,
100%.
brake calipers, the physics behind it. Like, I understand that the things collectively put together function as a car, just like a website is a bunch of disparate components. It's helpful to know how those things work, to troubleshoot, or to understand like how you're, what you're buying whenever you pay for web hosting and stuff like that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think most people, and this is something I've struggled with in my professional career for a long time. I remember being in my early 20s when I first started, and every time someone would ask me to help them with a problem, I would go and not just fix the problem for them, which is what they wanted. I would try to explain to them what the problem was. And some people would patronize me and they'd be like, "Oh, really? That's amazing." And I was like 20, 23, something like that. Some people were just patient and like, "Okay, that's nice. Thank you." And then some people were just like, "Will you please just fix it?" And I always used to get so frustrated with like, well, why don't they want to know? And the reality is because they were just trying to do something,
Yeah.
right? Technology isn't inherently interesting to them like it is to me. And
Yeah.
so, that's just something that I think Leo was trying to express to you, that it is kind of cool because HTML and CSS, like, they're truly one of the most approachable things you can do from a computer. I'm not even going to call it programming necessarily, but just like putting code onto a page, like that is truly some of the most approachable stuff you can do. But it also, like Bill's saying, like there's so much to it. Like, Leah's saying, "Oh, you shouldn't use JavaScript and all that." But the truth is that's where all the interactivity comes from. And like, there is so much more to it than just create a .html file and put, text in it and then have it show up. Like, it goes well beyond that. And I think if what you're trying to do is actually create a usable website that is modern and has the features that people expect, then doing it yourself is going to take you months, if not longer. And what are you doing at that point? You're spending all your time and effort focusing on something that isn't what you're trying to achieve. And that's where I thought it was misguided.
Yeah.
I understood
I
what he
mean,
was trying to do, but
yeah. I mean, the driving analogy is a good one, isn't it? Because all of
well,
us
car
can
analogies
drive.
fit everywhere, don't they?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, all of us
they
can
can.
drive. All of
If I
us can
use it.
drive, or most of us can drive safely, and most of us don't know
I
how a
don't know
car
that.
works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And
actually, it's incredible that most people don't drive safely and that we're not all dead every single
well,
time we
yeah.
get on the highway.
Well, I mean,
Like, cars it's incredible how we've made them as safe as we have, I guess is the best way to say that.
well,
But
I mean,
anyway,
I just, I have a joke that it's a proof of the existence of God, frankly, that there aren't thousands of deaths every single
yeah,
day because of the
yeah,
way that people drive. Because God, do they drive like maniacs, and I'm probably one of them myself. But it
uh,
is kind of like it doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I
yep,
mean?
yeah.
But I mean, but my point is that just because you you can use a piece of technology or a tool without necessarily knowing the inner workings of how it works, but you can still use it effectively. We have this in medicine as well. So there's this concept in anesthesia called the mean alveolar concentration. So this is the mean alveolar concentration of an anesthetic gas, which will make sure that the patient is unaware of what's happening. And yet, even with all the technological and advances that we've made in science and whatever, we're still not 100% sure how general anesthetics work. We know we know the way that they work in the sense of, sorry, you give this X amount, this gives you this, if you do this, If you use this amount of it, you'll get this side effect. If you use this amount of it, this is what will happen. These are the different planes of anesthesia. We know how it behaves.
Right.
But if you were to say, okay, which receptor does it work on in the brain? Then you're gonna that's a whole there's conferences based on that, where people are arguing about, well, I think it's this and I think it's that, because they're so it's such a complicated field. But again, we're able to use it safely and effectively to do what it is that we want to do with it, and so
and it's important as you as the practitioner of that to be able to just come in and deliver that care safely and in a repeatable manner. Not that you understand the physics of how every single thing is working, but it is helpful for you to understand how that thing works, right?
Yeah.
And I think technology is very much that. Like, nobody needs to understand the guts of this thing, right? And you can still pick it up and with very minimal prompting understand pretty quickly, like, oh, I touch this if I wanted to do that, or if I, I mean, it is intuitive in a sense that you don't have to understand every single thing about it. And I think, unfortunately, technology doesn't achieve that in a lot of ways. But the advice that you were getting, I think, was a little like way too deep for what you were trying to.
I mean, I could kind of tell. But I mean, I can also kind of see where he was going with the idea that, look, if you really want to take this as a learning thing, then there is a method and a way that you have to approach it. Which again, so then it comes, then that whole thing of convenience versus and effectiveness versus the knowledge of the underlying technology comes into it. We've talked about this when it comes to other things as well. Where there is a line after which, okay, this is too much effort now, right? And I'd rather just get shit done. But then there's also I don't want to be, because that's what pushed me away from the Spotify podcasting stuff, was the fact, my realization that they had all ownership of everything that I had made, and I had very little control over it. And if they decided to delete it, that was it, right? And I was now married to that service if I wanted to keep producing. And I thought, it's not really what I want. I want to have some control over the stuff I'm making. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, and I'm not going to just rat on Spotify on that. That's happened quite a few places. I don't know if any of you guys follow a creator, Becca Farce. I don't know how to pronounce it. Sounds a surname. It sounds Italian. Fasacci. I don't know. She used to be a reporter for The Verge, and would do reviews, and she was really into photography, and so she'd be like, I've taken 1,000 photos with the new iPhone, this is what I think, and taken 1,000 photos with the new Pixel, this is what I think. And you should get very nerdy into the strengths of each smartphone camera and stuff like that. Anyway, so she went out recently and said, I'm leaving The Verge and I'm making my own channel. And one of her first videos was, why did I leave? And it was very much a case of, I really enjoy, I'm paraphrasing now, but I really enjoyed the people. It's nothing about the team or the people that I worked with that was the problem or anything like that. It was the fact that I did not own my own content, and I would need to it would always belong to them. And if I had a different view that didn't necessarily fit, it could be that they would just get rid of that, and etc. And that kind of loss of control of your own creative output. I mean, you see this all the time, don't you? I mean, you see it in music all the time, don't you? You always hear about bands leaving one label and then going to another label because they weren't given the creative freedom to make their 80s EDM style of music, whatever that they actually want to make, and having to make pop friendly love songs or whatever. And you hear about it, don't you? And so I think there is something about having control over the output.
There's a freedom now because of technology and because of the sort of democratization of things that were, I mean, especially media production, right? I mean, that would have cost, how much to do studio time, cameras, the audio equipment, like everything would have just been prohibitively expensive. for an individual creator. And I think, the fact that kids now aspire to be a content creator, like that's a profession, that they can achieve just because they have the means of production at their disposal. Like it is infinitely, it's amazing to see the creativity that you can, a single app, like my daughter uses, what is that app? It's a video production app. Anyway, she does the things she does with it. CapCut. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. And the stuff she does on there is just the way she specifically uses it and sees it, and the things she does versus the things that I would do, and I remember being a kid, and my thing I could do was I had a cassette recorder, right? And I could sit there and record my voice, and like that was the thing I could do. And I would pretend I was reading the news, or and she does a different thing, and so it's the evolution of it over time. And I mean, and that's just playing, obviously, but like to be a content creator, like a professional writer, a professional videographer, a professional whatever, and yes, to be able to have those tools. And I mean, what we're doing, creating this podcast, like the idea that you can self-host things, and that you can edit things, and that you can do all this stuff and not have it cost you hundreds and thousands of dollars is what makes it so available and accessible. And also because you don't have to be a programmer to create a website. You don't have to be a videographer to use a camera. You don't have to be an audio engineer to use a microphone. These things have gotten so much more accessible and approachable. And so the point being that your website doesn't have to mean that you are spinning up Docker containers and understanding how all of that underlying technology works. If you want to just use a WordPress website, that's okay. Yeah. And don't let anyone give you crap for it, because the ultimate goal is for you to have a website, not for you to learn how to do everything, piece by piece by piece. If you want to learn that, great, go for it.
But it's cool that there's different levels at which you can come into this thing to get the exact same, depending on what level of control you want to have over, or what level you want to put the work into it, because you can go, even with, if you were just going to make a WordPress site, you can go to, I don't know, Linode or DigitalOcean. They've got one-click deployments on there where, it's, I think they bill it as being serverless. Is there really any such thing? There's always a server somewhere. It's just, you're not given any control over that. It's just basically a one-click application from your point of view. Or, you just run it in a, like in my case, a Docker container on your own machine, and it just works, So it just depends on what level you want to come at it and manage it from, and then you still end up at the end of the day with a website. So I was just
the person visiting your website probably does not care,
not one iota,
how it was created, right? No. And that's the bottom line: is if you're trying to get your content out there, it's not about the means of production; it's about the product itself, right?
Yeah,
it's about the content
and the availability, and the mass appeal and stuff like that. On a completely different note, have you guys seen this furore around Mozilla and Firefox? Something about
yeah.
So can someone explain that to me exactly? Because I'm a little bit
much ado about
confused.
Nothing.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, yes and no. It's the fact that instead of, this is for me what it's about, is instead of it being at the Firefox product level, where they're talking about the licensure of your content, like the idea that you're entering content through their system, through their software, and then that they have to have an access to that to be able to process it so that you can fill out a form or type in a URL or whatever, upload a file, like all those different things that you're doing using their software as a conduit. They're basically saying where before they had no verbiage around license or ownership or any of that. Now they're saying that there is a license to that content, right? And a lot of people are, and it's conjecture, I think, but a lot of people are thinking, well, they're going to capture it in some way and then use it to train AI or something like that. I don't necessarily know that that's the truth. The thing I don't like is that instead of it being at the Firefox level,
It's at the Mozilla
it's at the
level.
Mozilla
Yeah.
level, meaning that everything that they own, if you are using any of their products, they have that license to what you're doing, basically. The truth
Okay.
is that the software has always been like, if you're using a web browser, it's entirely possible that everything you're typing, every site you're visiting, like everything you do with that piece of software can be possibly phoning home and reporting that, to the creator of that software. We're assuming that it's not, or hoping that it's not. It's not that hard to tell if they are. I mean, you can put packet sniffers and like traffic monitors and stuff in place to see what the content is back and forth. But the point being that, of course, you have to allow for the processing of the information you're putting into the browser in order for it to be functional. It's not functional otherwise. It's the way that they've just sort of all of a sudden said, "Oh no, we need this license. We need it as an entity, not just for our products, but as a whole." And yeah, some of the ways that they've just basically been very specific. They've removed certain things from their FAQs, and I mean, basically, I saw two different opinions.
They removed the whole thing about we won't sell your data. They've not
Yeah.
changed the verbiage on that. They've not changed the language. They've just flat out removed the question and the answer that had anything to do with selling your data. It's just not there anymore. And I think
why have they done this? So why have they done this? Knowing that a large constituency of their users are the FOSS crowd.
Are they though? I mean,
I mean, let's be honest. Everybody uses Chrome,
yeah.
right? And if you don't use Chrome, you use Safari because you're on an Apple device. And then it's everybody else. I mean, I actually don't mind Microsoft Edge, but let's be honest, how many times do people actually use it? I don't know, right? And I like using things like Brave and Vivaldi, but I am a Linux nerd. I'm not the target demographic. Do you know what I mean? And you always keep hearing about how Firefox and Mozilla are the last great hope for free and open source web, and Gecko is a different engine to is it Blink? Yeah, Blink, which is the Chrome one, and all this kind. I mean, you hear this regularly in the Linux news.
But at the same
stuff.
time, even though they would admit that their largest user base is on Windows. So I mean,
True.
I
The
wonder-
largest user is on Windows, but again, I mean, there was a time in the mid to late 2000s where Firefox did seem to catch on. You used to hear a lot more people using it. People would talk about
well,
it.
that's because
just
IE
before
was
Chrome.
shit. You had
Yeah,
to
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
replace-
exactly. It was shit, and it was so much better, right? And I think there's these quite mesmerizing YouTube channels where they have like graphs of percentage of operating system usage by year, and it's like done to music, and you see the bars going up and down and all this kind of stuff. It's a bit kind of like ASMR. You kind of just keep looking at it and going, whoa, freaky graphs. Anyway, and I remember looking at that one, and that had I think at one point Mozilla had got to almost 20% around 2008, 2009 time, and then this thing called Chrome came, and then just obliterated everybody. And you can see how it rose and how Mozilla fell back.
I have to believe that, and this is my own experience, and so this is my experience as a technical person, and then my wife's experience as a non-technical person. Bill's right. At the time, the prevailing browser, like the one that had most market share, was Internet Explorer, and there really just wasn't any alternative to it. And so when Firefox came out, it was such a breath of fresh air because it was something new, it was different, it worked so much better than Internet Explorer in terms of like web standards, and the fact that it was faster, like it just was less buggy, it crashed
Tab
less often, it
browsing.
was just
that was
it had
amazing.
extensions. Yeah, it was just such a better experience, and it's persisted that way for about a decade. And so the sort of natural progression was that the user base just, I think the technical people understood that it was a better product or better experience than Internet Explorer. They would have less calls or problems with people or their family members or whoever using this as a browser. They themselves were using it as a browser, me included. And so that was just the browser of choice for a long time. The problem is Firefox and Mozilla got comfortable with that. And they really stopped innovating. They stopped making it a good experience. It started to get slow. It started to get buggy. And then all of a sudden, Chrome comes along, and it was a bare bones experience to start with. It compared to the rich sort of ecosystem that Firefox was at that point, but it was so much faster and so much less buggy and so much, and it worked. It was basically what, Firefox became Internet Explorer in a way. And the alternative was Chrome, and Chrome was this new, fresh, approach to it, and it was so fast. And then Chrome sort of just became the de facto because it was such a better experience. And that is the ultimate expression of like users go to what works best. It is simply the case. And so like people just started using Chrome, and Firefox, Mozilla just didn't have an answer to that. Like they did not buckle down and fix things until it was too late. Once their market share had already sort of evaporated, then they came out with, what was it? I can't remember the name of the Quantum. They came out with this thing called Quantum. And Quantum was the answer to the problems they were having. It was faster. It was less buggy. Like it worked very much, but it also broke compatibility with the extensions that they already had. Like there were some things they had to trade off to make that work. But it was too late. People were already switching to Chrome in like mass, in droves, just like, and they lost their user base. And each year, it is just every single year just gets lower and lower and lower. And now they're at a point where I don't think there's anything that they could possibly do to ingratiate themselves enough to users to become the de facto browser. It would take Chrome being awful for it to even be considered. Because what is the value proposition of using it at this point?
Yeah.
Right?
So again, well, I mean, first, you remind me of that legendary quote from The Dark Knight: "You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain," which is what Mozilla seemed to be doing a little bit.
Yeah.
The second point I wanted to say was, I am still not sure who Firefox is for then. If you're not going to double down on the privacy nerd crowd, which, okay, that's fine. But then how are you, what's your strategy? What's your market strategy? What is it that you offer that the others don't offer?
I'm going to come out and say it, that Firefox is around because Chrome makes sure, Google makes sure it is. They've propped this project up financially. Yeah. They've propped this product up financially so that they can say that they are not stopping competition within their space.
Right. That it's not a monopoly.
Right. And that's the only reason it exists at this point. Not that I don't want it to exist. I'm just saying that that's probably the reality of what we're seeing right now.
I mean, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I think, and it comes down to personal preference, and obviously, but the truth is, like, my wife won't use Firefox. So that was my technical experience, that it got worse and whatever. But from her experience, like, she was using stuff. Here's the other part that I didn't mention. At the time when Firefox took over from Internet Explorer, you did some things in the browser, but for the most part, it was just browsing websites and basically like very sort of surface level type things. There wasn't a lot of word processing or like Office type stuff. There wasn't like functional software in the sense that like doing
Google
things
Docs
in your
stuff.
browser.
Web-based
Exactly. That didn't really exist.
Yeah.
Exactly. So another huge focus for Chrome has been making those things work as well as they can. And Firefox, admittedly, and I'm just saying it, like, it just is not as good in a lot of cases. So And that's just been my personal experience and then experience of the people around me. But at some point, she told me like she was having problems with Firefox. I installed Chrome. She's never looked back. That was 10 years ago, easily. And I couldn't get her to use Firefox now if I paid her money to do it. She just doesn't, there's no value in Firefox for normal people.
So
That's
I
the unfortunate
remember.
thing.
Yeah, sorry, go on. Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, and the problem, as I see it, isn't so much that they changed their terms of service, or it's just that they cannot seem to focus on what is their mission. What are they doing? Are they the
And
the
who are you
champions
targeting?
of
And who are you targeting? Who is your
yeah? Are they the
target
champions
demographic?
of privacy and security and user experience and creating the best browser that they can? Because it certainly doesn't seem like that's what their focus has been. They are kind of like all over the place with what they're doing and like where they focus. And I get that, a web browser is a hugely complicated thing to produce, but like I don't get that sense that it's their mission to create that Firefox is really the most important thing to them. I just I don't feel that.
And I don't think
So
they
I
know how
so
to communicate it in a way that works, because whenever they're approached or whenever it's their turn to speak, what you get out of Mozilla is just a lot of corporate nonsense, and it comes across, well, not just pedantic, but it comes across like, you're avoiding or you're purposefully obscuring the point behind your entire existence, where they'll use words like verticals and open web and things like that. Okay, so open web, you're for open web. Tell us what that means to you, because that means different things to different people. What does it mean to you? And you just don't get an idea from talking to them. It wouldn't do any good to bring Mozilla people on a podcast to talk about. So what is it you got to say to people like us? Because what you would get, and of course I'm just assuming, I suppose, because I've yet to see any important Mozilla people on a podcast about Linux or open source.
I mean, it's interesting when you talk about a lot of this, because I remember I used to be, I haven't used Chrome as in official Google Chrome now for, I think, about a decade. Or not far off that, maybe 8 years, something like that. And I remember why I started using Google Chrome, the killer feature for me. And it had been the interoperability. You could be using Chrome on your desktop, and then on your phone you'll still have the same tabs, and you then get your tablet which had Chrome on, and that would still have your passwords and things like that. And the convenience of that, I was sold, basically, at that time. And it was only as time went on and I got more and more into free and open source software, more and more into Linux, and then seeing the kind of privacy concerns, and also the fact that as time went on, it became a much heavier program, requiring a lot more resources, and I often didn't have necessarily the best and most powerful computer. I was always kind of repurposing an old one, something like that. And I think that, and for other people, I think the whole web apps, in the sense of like Google Docs, Google Sheets, that kind of stuff, and the fact that it could be collaborative and people could see and the changes that were being made, those were like killer features that started its adoption at the beginning, as well as the fact that it was better than Internet Explorer at the time, and Mozilla. And I think that what Mozilla need to do is they need to find that killer thing again. It took them a while, actually, to have full interoperability between their desktop and their mobile versions. I mean, it wasn't. I'm not saying that they haven't done that. They have done that, but I'm just saying it wasn't there straight at the beginning when they first launched Firefox for Android, for example. It wasn't there straight at the beginning. It did take a bit. Extensions have only recently just come online on Android. I think maybe 2 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, it hasn't been that long.
So Mozilla need to find the killer thing that would make it useful. And it seems to me that you've got a demographic of people who, for all they want is private, secure browsing, that is there for the taking.
It really is, because all that...
yet they're not going for that. Now, either that means that this demographic is infinitesimally small and not worth pandering to, which is a possibility.
It's a huge possibility in a world where people just share every little moment of their lives freely.
Yeah. Or there's, as Eric says, there's no value proposition. I mean, because what is it you're offering? Because if you strip away the whole privacy and free and open source bit to Mozilla, what's left, really? And I say this as someone who does use Firefox. It's not my main browser anymore, but it's always on all my systems. I've got it everywhere. It's not like I haven't got it. I still use it.
Well, so the value now is that we still have just as good of use of tools that block certain types of content and certain types of
ad blocking, basically.
Ad blocking and all those things that worked 5 years ago will work, for the conceivable future. Whereas Chrome or Chromium has made it more and more difficult, to the point where I guess it's impossible to block everything now.
Well, there's still Chromium-based browsers, including Microsoft Edge of all things, which still do ad blocking out of the box. You don't need extensions for it.
Well, it is an extension because it's their little goodness on top of it.
Yeah.
On top of the Chromium.
What I mean is, you don't have to go off and install uBlock Origin, because that's basically where this is coming from, isn't it? The whole Manifest 2, Manifest 3 business.
Yeah.
So the point I'm saying is that even that, you can get that on. It's like one of the reasons that I got rid of my YouTube Premium subscription was the fact that I realized that I could just use YouTube in the browser, on Brave browser on my phone, and it would be just like having YouTube Premium. No ads, and playback when the screen is off. That's
it's
it.
The same if you do it through the DuckDuckGo search engine. You get that same functionality. And I stopped using Chrome, and I don't know how long it's been now. It might be at least 10 years since they stopped offering the sync functionality in Chromium. And Chromium is the easy package manager way of getting a Chrome sort of experience, whereas you kind of have to go off road to get, Google branded Chrome. Go to their website and download their deb and install it, which isn't a big deal, but that's just something we don't like doing on Linux, unless you want to install a Flatpak or something like that, and then you're still kind of going outside of
off the reservation.
Yeah, you're going off the reservation. So that's kind of when because now with Firefox and their Firefox sync, I'm enjoying that sync functionality between all the devices that I kind of lost with the Chromium. And I still keep Chromium around for, it still makes the best web apps and things with, if you need to use Google tools, that, Chromium is still going to be, like Eric was saying, it's still going to be the best experience.
So just as a question, what is your main browser? Is it Firefox?
Yeah, I would say that, yeah.
Okay. What about you, Eric?
It's kind of funny, I preempted this as of 2 or 3 weeks ago. I've been using Vivaldi for a long time, and I really do like it. I think they've made Chrome into something that is interesting and usable, in terms of features. They do a lot to make it a better browser, and unfortunately though, they can't fix everything. So this V3 stuff where they're killing a lot of extensions, I actually just looked in here, and some of the extensions I really like cookie auto delete and uBlock Origin, this V3 manifest stuff is just breaking them. And it's a bummer, because cookie auto delete is a real simple thing. You go to a website, it puts a bunch of shitty cookies on your browser, and as soon as you leave that website, it deletes said shitty cookies because you don't need them. And so like it's a simple tool, and it does one thing really well. And because of V3 manifest V3, it's just now it's going to be broken. So is there an alternative? I don't know. This is one of the things that could be a I think if I were Mozilla, Manifest V3 would be something I would be leaning into really hard right now.
But they're not.
And just saying like,
and that's
no, of
that's
course
why,
they aren't. Why would they? That would make sense.
Yeah.
They don't do things
I
that make
thought
sense.
but I thought that I did hear some stuff saying that they were.
You got to go out of your way to find that kind of commentary as a thing, though. What they're telling normal people is just a lot of corporate nonsense about.
So like here, take me as a normal person, right? Here I am. My wife just said this to me. Literally 3 days ago, she sent me a message saying, "Hey, my browser's telling me I should get rid of uBlock Origin or that it's not supported. What am I supposed to do?" I said, "Just keep it for now, and I'll find some alternative." The truth being that there's probably not going to be a alternative that works as well. Just or until someone maybe is clever enough to figure out like a way around. And then it's going to be this like back and forth war, I think, between the extension developers and Google. But ultimately, like they're breaking all the things that make it harder for Google to track you. And so Google's trying to break all those things. Like, of course they are. But, it's so from my experience as an end user, and my wife's like, she sees that an extension she's been using for years now all of a sudden isn't viable because, the browser doesn't support it. Same for me. Some of the ones that I really like. Now, is that enough? Like, she doesn't care because I don't think she even cares that ads are being blocked personally. Like, I do it because it annoys me when I get on her computer. But for me, it's a big deal. Like, if I can't find something that works as good as the extensions that I have been using and enjoying for a long time now, even though I really like Vivaldi, I may just have to go back to Firefox because I had, just like I said, I preemptively had just switched to Vivaldi. I don't know if I made that clear, but that's what I had been doing. I've been using Vivaldi on Android for years because, in my opinion, it's the best experience. Firefox, and I know a lot of people have said they use it on Android and they don't have problems. I do. It's even though there are extensions and it is on paper a great browser, it just doesn't work as well for me. But Vivaldi does.
So I had the interesting thing of I was using Firefox almost exclusively. It was for a number of years. I'm not going to say maybe 4, something like that. On the phone and on my laptop and on my desktop and stuff like that. And then once in a while, I'd come across some website that just wouldn't work very well. And it took me clever magic here. It took me a little bit of time to realize, this is because of the engine. It's because it's all built for Chrome and Blink and all this kind of stuff. I should probably have a Chromium-based browser as well around, just in case, 1 or 2 sites don't work or whatever. And that's when I discovered Brave initially, and then Vivaldi, because Vivaldi seemed to have very good sync as well. And I was using that almost exclusively for maybe about 2 years or so. And I've kind of gone back a little bit to Brave, just because I don't know about you, maybe it's just me. I found Vivaldi starting to get a bit bloated. I mean, I know it's always been chock full of stuff, and that's its kind of USP, isn't it? That you can live in that browser and not even have to do anything. You can even take screenshots from that browser, without having to even leave your browser window. But I did
you
find
can do
it
that in
slowing
Firefox,
things
by
down.
the way. Just thought I'd drop that down.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But and so at the moment, I'm kind of still, I'm finding myself kind of gravitating toward, not gravitating, I'm kind of flicking through. It annoys the OCD the hell out of me that I've got 4 browsers on my phone. It really annoys me that why have I got 4? I should just have 1. But sometimes you find that certain sites are better for certain things, and certain things work better in certain places, and the sync in certain things is better than the sync in other things. I quite like the fact that Brave has a sync where you don't even have to have a login. I do quite like that concept. I know that a lot of people get put off by all the crypto shit, but then you just ignore that. You take it or leave it, and I just leave it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting. One thing I didn't realize was that how common Samsung internet is, because Samsung. I mean, I didn't even realize this till about 2 years ago. The Samsung internet, you can actually get a. I mean, I don't know if you can get it on Linux, but you can get it on Windows as a separate browser, and it then syncs with all your Samsung stuff, and it's Chromium based and all this kind of stuff, and it has its own market share because Samsung is the biggest Android OEM out there, and it's Internet Explorer. Sorry, Samsung Internet is pre-installed, as is Chrome, but
It's actually a
and
pretty
and
good browser on Android too. I've used it
yeah,
for a couple things. I wonder if it would work good in wine. I'm gonna have to try
interesting.
that, see if it works.
That'll be interesting.
Wine's gotten
I don't.
better and
I don't
better.
think there's a Linux app. I don't think there is for
Yeah,
Samsung
probably
Internet.
not.
Although hey, more great radio. Man, look stuff up on internet. You know,
Yeah, it's worth
I've been
checking
how's
having
the
out.
app?
this. This
Yeah,
is a
go on,
bit of
Aaron.
an offshoot. I've been having this thought lately about the defeatist attitude, and this kind of applies to a lot of things in life. But the idea that when something changes and you don't like it, the idea that you can either try to stay and maybe challenge that and try to fix it, or I guess rally other people to try to find ways to make the situation better, whether that's Firefox not being as great as it is, or so from a technology standpoint and trying to, I don't know, contribute in some way to something, or even in life, like use a service or a product, or you have a certain affiliation with something and they don't do something or they do something you don't like, and rather than sort of fighting for what you believe in, like you just say, all right, hell with it, I'm done with this, and then you switch to something else. Like my not liking Firefox or not liking Mozilla and the way that they operate made me want to use something else. And is that really, if everybody did that, then basically Firefox would die, and then we would have no alternatives and would all just live in Chrome world, and that would be the end of it. And so I don't know. I feel like I should not just give up and keep using Firefox, even though they're making it really hard for me to
Yeah, I
want to keep
mean,
doing it.
yeah. So then if you are using it, you're using it for ideological reasons, not because you think it's the best tool for the job, which is fine. If
Yeah,
there is merit to that. Some people, they
yeah,
don't like the philosophy behind a project, and they're like, I just can't get behind that, and so I'm going to go somewhere else, and that's fair enough. But that's what you got to understand that you're doing. You're not doing it because you think that it's a better browser, but it aligns better with my ideas. And that's my
yeah,
point about why don't they lean more and more into that? Because you might find more people might take it up. I know privacy and security. I know we were saying it is true that most people just don't give a crap, and they'll share everything, and they'll share their national insurance numbers up on in Twitter if they given half the opportunity to do so. But at the same time, there are more and more people. No, nowhere near a majority at all. But it's getting more significant of people who are a bit uncomfortable with the amount of data that big tech have, and are kind of slowly maybe moving away from certain things. I mean, I've only just today, for example, I was watching a video about someone who is using Graphene OS on their Android, on their Pixel. And the backstory to that, if you look at her videos a couple before that, were the fact that she decided that she needed to be a bit more minimalist with her tech, spending too much time on my phone, spending too much time on the web, this, that, and the other. And I wanted to decrease my digital footprint. And then started realizing exactly how much data was going from Google, from Chrome, from Android, to whatever. And started on this whole thing, a minimalist launcher and things like that, de-Googling. And then the latest one was to use Graphene OS on our Pixel. And the only thing that I found interesting, I mean, as a guy that has done ROMing and all sorts of stuff in the past, although I don't do it now. She said this thing about how Graphene OS on her Pixel 7. I think it was a Pixel 7 she'd put it on. Might have been an 8, actually. No, I think it was a Pixel 8. The battery life had increased by 3 days. Using that. And the only explanation that she had was the fact that it was no longer phoning home all the time with all your data. Because she wasn't using it in any other different way than she was before. She's doing the same kind of stuff, nothing out of the ordinary. And whereas before she'd put the ROM on, it was a daily phone. You had to charge it overnight. It wasn't that it was bad battery life, but it was just the standard charge it overnight while you go, when you go to bed. And now it was lasting 3 days. And I just thought, whoa, that's something, isn't it?
And it's difficult to explain because you're right. It might be a combination of a lot of services that are not running now that you're using something else, Anyway, we better wrap it up for right now. It's been a heck of a show. Give us a shout. Tell us what you think. Show at 3ftpodcast.org or hit us up on our Discord.
3FT, wrong podcast.
Oh, did I really just do that?
The compartments are melding. The compartments are melding.
Oh my gosh. It's been a long day and I'm not done yet. Well, through the beauty of editing, you people will never hear this. Except for the 4 of you in the live stream. Up to. Good. Show at linuxotc.org or hit us up on our Discord channel. Or we're on Mastodon. LinuxOTC at fostodon.org. We will be back in 2 weeks. Until then, I've been Bill.
I've been Majid.
Damn. I've been Majid, and he's been Eric.
Oh, see you, folks. Thanks, everybody.